So back in the summer of 2019, I received a wooden rowing scull from my uncle. You can see here that the rowing scull was pretty beaten up. I did some minor repairs, such as replacing the decks and cleaned some rot in some places. However, 2 years later, the boat blew over in a windstorm and received some pretty bad damage. I saw the Capstone as an opportunity to learn more about the repairs of different types of rowing sculls. And by different types of rowing sculls, I mean the different materials that rowing sculls are made out of, such as carbon fiber, composite, or wooden. Most of the video revolves around my experience fixing the wooden rowing skull with my dad as a mentor through the process. However, I was able to sit down with two experts and discuss the repairs of sculls made from different materials.
I'm here at Holyoke Rows to meet with the executive director, Stephanie Moore.
So we have several different types of boats, but the things people are going to consider when they think about a boat is, and how they're going to make it, is one, you want it to be light. So you want to choose a material that's going to be light, you want it to be strong, so a guy like you can jump in it and push and not break it, right? Mm-hmm. And then you want it to be stiff so that your energy is going to go into moving the boat backwards and not into making the boat flex. And then there's always cost, right? Mm-hmm. So a boat like this is made out of carbon fiber. It's the black stuff. You can see the weave of it in here. Carbon fiber is relatively expensive as materials go, and it's very strong. The way you can use less carbon fiber and make it even stronger is you make a sandwich, a carbon fiber sandwich, so 2 layers of carbon fiber and then a layer of honeycomb matrix in between. Which makes for then the hull of the boat really strong. It doesn't flex. The disadvantage of it is that it doesn't flex when you bang into something. So bump into a buoy, bump into a rock, bump into someone else, it's probably going to puncture that boat, right? Not that it's very hard to fix. Just another piece of carbon fiber on top can fix that. But then to get it cosmetically beautiful again takes a decent amount of work. But carbon fiber is probably the most popular material right now for boats. The other material that boats are made out of is just plain fiberglass. Fiberglass is a little heavier, has different strength qualities, and is cheaper, significantly cheaper. So a lot of boats are made out of fiberglass, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's great. So any of these boats over here have a decent amount of fiberglass in them. They can also add strips of carbon fiber in places that they want to add some more stiffness to. And that was sort of one of the ways that they got boats to be stiff initially before switching to all carbon fiber. The other type of boat that we have is this is fiberglass too. It's a single skin, so instead of a honeycomb matrix, it's a single skin, both the Van Dusen up here and the pine roots down here. So when you bump into them, they'll flex a little. So they're really good for our training boats. Over time, that flex will develop some cracks into the paint because it's a gel coat, and that's, whatever, that's age in a boat. They're also a little bit heavier, the pine roots are. The Van Dusen is made with a sort of super light construction where it takes carbon fiber tubing to add stiffness to the hull, so that it won't flex as much, but it's a very delicate boat. We're not going to have beginners use it. We're not going to have huge people use it, and you have to be careful with it. But it is really light. So those are the main types of boats we have. All these boats have different qualities in terms of when you go to fix them, how you fix them. Like a gel coat boat is going to be a little bit different than a boat with just a paint job. But they're all repairable here. We just don't always do the finish work, so they don't always look great after they've been repaired. But
we're here with Bob Klinger, the starter of Klinger Engineering, to talk about some composite boats and some of the repairs that he has had to do on them. So how did you first get involved in rowing?
Started rowing in college. I started rowing at a small school in Annapolis, Maryland, St. John's College. Was involved in their program, left there after 1 year and went to row at Northeastern University in Boston, and I rowed there for 4 years on their varsity program.
Can you tell us about your boat repairing business and how you got into it?
So I studied mechanical engineering while I was at Northeastern, while I was rowing. And when I was looking for jobs on their co-op program, I found an organization, it was the U.S. Army. Their materials lab was located in Watertown, and so I co-opted there while I went to school at Northeastern. They had all of the composite materials that you would use to make these boats, all the processing equipment and everything else, and so I learned about the materials the boats were made out of while I was in school, but then also while I was working. Once I got out of school, I worked for some other people in the composite materials area, and then because there was not enough rowing shell repair, I said I can do this and started my own business and went from there.
What's the most common repair that you've had to do?
Most common repairs are punctures, little things. The boats aren't designed for point load. They're designed for large surface load like water. So point loads are very problematic on these boats. So small punctures, scratches, things like that were by far the most common.
How would you go about like fixing that on like a composite boat?
Most boats are honeycomb. So most boats, as long as it doesn't puncture the inside as well as it doesn't puncture the inside skin, it only punctures the outside skin. A lot of times you can just lay a piece of carbon fiber. You can sand it down, make sure you get back down to the carbon that's underneath, and then put a carbon fiber patch over top of that, sand it and fair it, prime it, paint it.
Are there any particular challenging repairs that you've had to do on some of these boats?
It's always fun putting them back together after they've been broken in half. That's always difficult because you have not only the x-axis but the y-axis. So you got to worry about whether the boat has a twist, whether the boat is together left to right, but also up and down. So there's a lot of stuff going on when they're completely shattered, but it can be done.
What advice would you give someone going into this industry of composite boat repair and building?
Learn from other people who have gone before you. There's a lot of boat building schools. There's a lot of very good schools out there that deal with this. The materials in general aren't terrible for you, but in this business you swim in them. And so you need to be very careful about safety. So that's where learning from somebody who has come before you, somebody who can explain things like that, is going to be invaluable. So, and there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of people who want to help. There's a lot of different schools that specifically deal with composites and composite repairs and things like that.
I first started with assessing all of the damage on the boat, and as you can see, the boat is in pretty bad shape. There are punctures here, here, and here, and the wood has started to split right here. The next thing I did was to take off the soft deck in the stern in order to get to the punctures from the other side. You can see here that I discovered a lot of the supports had been broken in the stern, probably from when it had been blown over in the wind. You can also see right here that a piece from the splash guard has broken off, which will probably have to be replaced. I started with fixing these supports with some West System epoxy. You can see here I just applied this with my hand and then duct taped it so the wood would stay in place while it dried. Next I moved on to the punctures and used some epoxy wood filler to fill those. You can see here I applied it in a similar way as for the supports and then just wiped it down with some acetone to get rid of the excess epoxy. Next I used some fiberglass patches on the inside to give the boat some extra support. You can see here I just cut out a bunch of squares and soaked these in epoxy. This made anywhere we put these patches stronger than any other part in the boat. When it was dry, there was a few little stringy bits from the fiberglass, so I just zipped those off with the Dremel tool. From here I started working on the broken bit that I mentioned before. I cut it down into an easier shape so it would be easier to replace it with. I then measured it for what I would need to cut out by comparing it to the other side where the splash guard wasn't broken off. You can see here I used the same tool as before to cut out the two pieces of wood to replace the splash guard. And then I just used the same epoxy that I've been using to clamp the piece back on and wait for it to dry. Next I took off the decking in the bow, and lucky for me there are no other supports broken, so I didn't need to fix anything there. I then started sanding down the boat, starting with a lower grit and increasing it so the boat would be extra smooth. The smoother the bottom of the boat, the less resistance the boat has in the water. Next, I just put on a layer of spar varnish, and because this was the first coat, it had to be applied very thin. I ended up doing 5 coats of the spar varnish to make it really smooth, and in between each coat, I used steel wool and a tack cloth, which would roughen up the surface and let the spar varnish soak into the boat. The next thing to do was flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. Now is for the last step, which was to put on the decks. First, I cut out the nylon plastic to the boat's general shape, and then I put the double-faced tape on and stretched the plastic over the boat. The last thing to do is just to cut off the excess and then put some decal tape on to make it look really good. And that's the end of my capstone. Thanks for watching.